Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Y'all recognize that one? Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's a knowing. Much higher ground. Thank y'all so much. It was awesome. Yeah. Whew. I love a cappella singing. That's great. So once again, I'm Rick Busby, licensed Unity teacher here at Unity Church of Hills. It's a great day and a great privilege for me to be here with you all today, and it's also an extra added privilege and honor for me because my beautiful niece Aries chose to show up and see me talk. She's sitting right here on the front row with me. I had forgotten she was coming, and she's wearing like 4-inch heels. She was taller than me. I didn't even recognize her. So today we are going to be talking about the illuminating fire of faith. Who was here on the Whitestone service? Okay, I hinted at this talk in the Whitestone service. We talked a little bit about the power of faith at the beginning of it. If you were here for the Whitestone service, at some point in that talk, you heard me make a quote that we heard that a New Year's resolution was a to-do list for the first week of the year. Y'all remember that? So how are y'all doing with that resolution? Did it last a week? Is it still going on? My word for the year on my Whitestone service, I know I told everybody to contain this and not talk about it and everything, but I'm going to talk about it today because my Whitestone word was restoration. And in this period that we're going through in flux here in the community and everything, there is a restoration that is required. There's a restoration of the community, a community-led community. And so the work is ours to do here, to prepare the way for the next spiritual leader to emerge and be attracted to our community. In that period in time when we're in that sort of fallow period, that period of in between, there's a lot of work to be done here. But there's also very, very good signs. I've been hearing a lot of different things from different people and everything, but one of the all-encompassing idea around it was there's a re-energizing that we feel. People coming back, re-engaging, have a new sense of energy and building the community back up. And it's really, really good to see. It's really good to feel. I'm hardly here on Sundays because I speak at many, many other Unity churches around the Central Texas area and everything, so I'm only here once in a while to be able to partake and experience the energy here in the community. But I get a lot of phone calls from people here and there. I have my mastermind partners are part of the community. I see them on Thursday, so I'm staying engaged and I hear things along the way. But there's this new sense of energy that's coming in back in here, and it's our work to do. It's a community of people here that we're working as a community to transform lives. It's not up to any one person to do that transformation. It's up to each one of us not only to engage and take on the work that is mine to do to transform my own life, but then as we put it into service in the community and share with others and connect with others, inspire others to also do that work. In the Whitestone service, as y'all know, the idea of the Whitestone service is based on a verse from Revelations. And it's chapter 2, verse 17 is the verse that's taken out of there that becomes the inspiration for that. The first line in that verse says for us that let those who have ears to hear what the churches are being told. And the churches is not, I metaphysically unpacked that in the Whitestone service and everything, but just as a reminder here, that in a metaphysical sense, the churches are not just these physical buildings that we call a church. In a metaphysical sense, the church is each one of our own individual consciousness, the activity of my own thinking and feeling nature, my own consciousness, the quality of that is my own church. You have one as well. And that quality is usually in flux at all times. Some days we have good days, some days we have not so good days. Some days we're on top of the world and on top of our game, and other days we may be challenged. But with the power of our faith, we're able to perceive that there is an underlying divine order being worked out, even in the midst of our challenges, individually, collectively, as a community, as a world. There's a lot of challenges going on in the external world, and if we keep waiting on somebody else to solve those problems, we're going to be waiting a long time, because it's really incumbent upon me, it's incumbent upon you, where we're planted to make those resolutions, come up with those creative solutions. And the way we're able to navigate that in a way that is true to sort of the divine creative principle that's in play, we're able to perceive that divine order, we're able to perceive those possibilities that are not yet in physical manifestation through the power of our faith. I was raised kind of generally in and around the Catholic Church, and also had some Baptist orientation via my stepfather growing up. And when I was younger, what I remember was that when we were talking about faith, it was putting your faith in something. And in particular, with the grounding and the education, the experience that I got from the churches and everything, was putting your faith in God or putting your faith in Jesus Christ. And that was the measure of your faith. You have a problem, put your faith in God. You have a need for healing, put your faith in Jesus Christ. So faith was an idea about placing it in something. I came to this realization a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a talk in Bernie, that it feels like that orientation, that education that we got, that experience that I received, you may have had a different experience, but that idea of putting my faith in God or putting my faith in Jesus Christ was like elementary school. It was like elementary school kind of way of getting us as children, as young people and everything, to recognize the need to place our faith in a higher power. I know that like in 12-step programs, for example, that's one of the, if I think it is the first step, it's like recognizing that, I have a problem and I need to place my faith in a higher power to help me work through this problem. Charles had a different idea about faith. The 12 powers are all creative powers in their essence. And the power of faith, from the way that Charles talks about it, he calls it the perceiving power, and that's linked with our ability to bring things into manifestation. For those of you all who have done some work around the 12 powers, or reading the book or doing some study groups or whatever the case may be, one of the ideas about the 12 powers is they are not individual powers that work in isolation. Like I don't just have a power of faith and a power of love and a power of order and a power of discernment and wisdom. They are intended to work together, because the synergistic power of each of these individual powers working in concert with the other powers, that synergistic energy, the power that results from that is just exponential and geometric. It's way beyond the capacity of any one of those powers working on its own. Has anybody ever used the power of their love towards something that was not necessarily good for you? Yeah. Okay, so I'm at the right meeting. Good. That's one example where we can love something, be in love with something that's not necessarily in our highest good and in our best interests and everything. So we're trying to take this capacity for our power of love and make it independent of the others, and ignore the power of order, ignore the power of discernment and understanding, and just do what we want to do because it feels good in the moment and it's what we want. That's an example about how we can try to use one of these powers independent of others. Charles calls the power of love the harmonizing power, right? The harmonizing power. It's the one that kind of fuses all of these powers together. If there's discord, if there's dissonance in our lives or in our circumstances and everything, that by bringing the power of love into it, we can harmonize that dissonance. We can harmonize that discord. And then we're able to see more clearly. Course in Miracles students, we got some Course in Miracles students here. We know that the fundamental choice in A Course in Miracles is what? Between love and fear, love and fear, love and fear. And we're faced with that choice thousands of times a day. Thousands of times a day. And that will be that way for the rest of our lives because we're always choosing and calibrating back and forth between love and fear. When I fall into my fear, I feel a sense of separation. I'm identifying with my little self. I have to do it myself. I can't ask anybody for any help. Oh, my God. What would they think of me if I need help from somebody? That I can't do it myself. And then I'm identifying with Rick, the personality self, the ego self. And I maybe even feel a little ashamed to be in that position to even have to ask for help. And in that kind of condition, in that kind of circumstance, I'm identifying with my little self. The power of my faith, though, that once I get sick and tired of being sick and tired of doing it that way, and I have to do what? Choose again, right? That when I choose again, I'm choosing from love, and I'm harmonizing that dissonance that's going on, first of all. But then in the power of my love, as I harmonize that and get back into balance, then I'm able to see more clearly with the power of my faith and perceive that there's a possibility for this all to work out in a way that I can't do by myself. I can't do unto myself, that I do need help. It's actually that act of surrender and recognition that we do need help, that in that moment when we make that decision, oftentimes we feel weak, right? But that act of surrender is actually an act of power. That moment, that instant when we surrender and recognize that there is a higher power that I have available to me. It's not, it may be precipitated by a moment of weakness, but it's an act of power. Men growing up are told, never surrender, never retreat. Don't let them see you sweat, right? That's one of the ways that men are conditioned in this world. No surrender. But in a spiritual sense, it's one of the most positive things that we can do, because in that act of surrender, we become receptive. We become open to Spirit to come in and work its way in our lives. That receptivity, the Apostle Peter is the one that is the symbolic apostle for the power of faith. And if you'll recall, his name wasn't always Peter. At first it was Simon. And metaphysically, the word Simon means receptivity, that openness to receive, to hear. Let those that have ears hear, right? That being in that receptive posture. When we're receptive, that's actually kind of a passive energy. And it does require a certain amount of surrender to be in that receptivity, because our rational mind wants to think that we got it. We know the answer. We don't need any help. I can do this on my own, right? But it's not true. It's not true. There are some things that we all become masters at in our lives, some skill sets that we have where we're all masters at something or another, maybe even multiple things, right? But even when we're doing that thing, we are actually working in cooperation with spiritual principle, with creative principle, right? And it's the power of our faith that allows us to perceive the possibility before it comes into manifestation. Anybody ever had a dark night of the soul? Good. I'm still at the right meeting. Good. I've had a few dark nights of the soul along the way. And the interesting thing about each one of those experiences over the course of time is they actually reinforced my faith. In that darkest moment, the darkest hour always comes before the dawn. Rest in peace, David Crosby. Yeah, right? The darkest hour always comes before the dawn. That's that idea of let there be light. Now, this book here, I talked about this book briefly at the New Year's service, the Whitestone service. This is a book that was put together by a faculty member at UWM, Michael Madej. He was a reverend and a teacher there at UWM for a long time. He passed away a few years ago. But at the turn of the century, he put together this book. He edited it and put it together. And it's called New Thought for a New Millennium, 12 Powers for the 21st Century. This book is out of print, but there are some copies available on Amazon. I think right now I'm probably the #1 salesman for this book in the past month or so. After every service, somebody comes and tags me, takes a picture of it, and they wind up going and buying a copy. You can get a copy of it for about $5 on Amazon. Anybody who's interested in the 12 Powers, I highly recommend it. The chapter on faith was written by a woman named Rosemary. I say it Guiley, but it could be Gilly, Guiley. And she's a best-selling author, and her area of expertise, so to speak, was that she would look at extraordinary human abilities, like psychic phenomenon and things like that. And she became very, very well known for that. And all of these extraordinary experiences that we observed, that she documented in her work and everything, every time we have one of these extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary experiences, it actually pushes the boundaries further out about what's possible. What's possible. So she writes about the power of faith in this book. I'm going to read the opening section here because she's proposing. Anybody ever heard that idea? We're talking about the Apostle Peter, right? And his original name, Simon, was receptivity. But you recall from Matthew when Jesus was asking the apostles, what's everybody saying about me? What do you say about me? And he turns to Peter and he says, Simon at the time, who do you say I am? And he answers, I see that you're the Son of God, the Christ, the Messiah. And then Jesus responds, you've said rightly, and he's going to build his church upon this rock. And so for about 2 millennia, the metaphor of the rock was sort of the symbol of faith. Faith like a rock. Bob Seger made a song of it, right? I remember, like a rock. Right? I think they made a Chevy commercial out of it or something like that. Some point in time as well. But that idea of like a rock, that imperturbable, undisturbable, can withstand pressure, can withstand force against it and everything. We can stand steady in that. So it was kind of an apt metaphor. I'm not saying it's not useful, but it's incomplete. And Rosemary Gilly, she talks about this, and she proposes that we substitute the rock in the 21st century. I'm going to read this opening paragraph from her chapter. In every age, our perception of the qualities of faith changes in accordance with the times. During the ministry of Jesus, faith was likened unto a rock, the rock upon which Jesus declared he would build his church. Over the course of time, we have envisioned faith similarly as a steadying influence, calm, solid, unwavering, deep, and still. All of these qualities continue to hold fast, but for the new era of the 21st century, faith is more energetic and active. It is a fire. The fire of faith empowers and energizes. It purifies. It makes the torch that lights our daily lives and our spiritual path. It emblazons the way to God. The fire of faith calls us to action. The road ahead of us is clear. We must use faith to erase fear. We must use faith to heal. We must use faith to work miracles. And faith operates in all aspects of life, not just spiritual. I propose, anybody ever had a crisis of faith? We mentioned the dark night of the soul. Everybody had a crisis of faith, right? And we believe that in that moment of the crisis of faith, that our faith is just not perfect or we've lost it. The truth is, we have and have always had perfect faith at all times, in all circumstances. Your faith is still intact. It's perfect. The variable is, in what are we placing our faith? Remember, Charles describes faith as the perceiving power. So if I'm perceiving that I was the son of an alcoholic father and the product of a divorced family and had dad issues, because of all that, and then I had to work through that. I remember growing up, one of my prevailing ideas was that I was going to do whatever I could to not become my dad. Anybody recognize that? It's just me. I'm not going to become my dad. And then one day when I was about 42, 43 years old, my dad had passed away. And I was driving down the road one day and looking out, and I swear this is true. It felt like my dad was behind my eyes and that I was looking out at the world and that my dad was literally inside my body, and I was looking as if I was looking through my father's eyes. And I recognized in that moment that all of that effort to try and deny my father, to not become him, it was actually impossible. Because I'm a product of him. I'm a product of him and my mother. I'm also a product of my stepfather, who had a very great stepfather, who was a steadying influence. Right? So I kind of had, in my estimation, kind of the best of both worlds. Where my father was an alcoholic, my stepfather went to AA for 30 years and was a very influential guy in AA for 30 years. So I had kind of both experiences. So in sum total, it wasn't true that I was damaged because I was the son of my father who I was judging. And it was a little while after he passed away. Actually, it was a couple, 3 years after he passed away. And I was driving to Beaumont one day, and I was just about to Interstate 10, coming down through, LaGrange and everything, just about to turn onto Interstate 10 in Columbus there. And that was the moment that grief decided to arrive. And I literally had to pull over on the side of the highway for about 15 minutes on Interstate 10 and just weep and just cry. And it was in that moment, that release, that forgiveness entered, acceptance entered, surrender entered. And I was able to say, you know what? When I think about it, there actually was some good there with my dad. There are many, many gifts that I have that were the direct result of my relationship with my father. And I was trying to get rid of my dad because of the things I was judging bad about that relationship. Well, you can't throw all that out because there's some good too that I want to retain. But I'm completely incapable of sorting out what's the good and the bad of my own. I'm incapable of that I needed help. And it was in that dark moment, once again, that's an act of faith. That's an act of faith. It's not just a spiritual thing that we do at church. Faith actually operates in every single aspect of our lives. There's not one area of your life where the power of your faith is not in play. Last weekend, I helped manage a songwriter symposium for 5 days at the Holiday Inn at 290 and 35. It's an annual thing that we do with the Austin Songwriters Group. And I was holding a workshop. And this idea of faith came into the workshop, where I was telling the songwriters in attendance, it's like, you don't realize that your every time you create a song, that you are employing your power of faith. Because once again, faith is our perceiving power. It's the power that allows us to perceive possibilities before they have come into manifestation. Then we link it up with our imagination. We link it up with our sense of order or our sense of understanding. We start working in concert with the other powers. And then slowly but surely, with the power of our faith, we might hear, oh, that's a good line. That's potentially a title to a song. That's the hook line, right? And then we see that, we perceive that for a moment, and then we kind of saddle up and link it with our imagination. Being able to perceive it is just the first step. If we don't follow through on it, it doesn't come into manifestation. So when you're in that dark night of the soul, when you're in that state of dissonance or circumstances are challenging you and you don't know where your faith is, probably your first step is to recognize that you're placing your faith in the circumstances. That the circumstances have more power than you do. The circumstances have more power than God does. And we place our faith in these circumstances that they're going to overcome me. They're going to take me over. I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose. I'm not going to win. That's all my little self saying that. Of Course in Miracles fans will recognize that idea of the little self, the magnificent self. That we're born in magnitude. We're born to accomplish and create magnitude in our lives. We're born for greatness. So if you're feeling small, if you're seeing your possibilities as limited, as your possibilities as being small, or that the possibilities that you may be aspiring to are beyond your control. Actually, they are beyond your control to a certain degree. What is in your control is to saddle up and do the work that is necessary, that is yours to do, to help bring it into manifestation. There are other forces at work in the world, in the cosmos, that will provide assistance, be of service to us in that regard. But if we're not willing, if we're not moving forward in that confidence, faith is beyond just belief. It is knowing. It's not just a belief, it is a knowing. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Y'all recognize that one? Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's a knowing. Treating faith as just a belief in something is, once again, that's elementary school. That's a way that they can kind of condition and orient us when we're younger. But as we get older, as Rosemary Gilly says here in the 21st century, it's a more active power. Does anybody see the possibility of this community once again thriving and once again getting back to the business of transforming lives? Right? I do. I know you do. And it becomes incumbent upon each one of us, the condition of each one of our internal churches, the activity of our own thinking, that internal church that I have, the internal church that Reggie has, the internal church that Ellen has, the internal church that Lisa has, the internal church that Frank has. We all have an internal church going on. The only relevant question on any given day is, what is the condition of my internal church today? What is the condition of my internal church today? And then if I'm going to go, if it's not up to par, according to me, and then I come and connect with my community, I'm bringing that subpar church into this larger community. But if we're doing the work of transforming lives, I know I can go there and find connection. I can find love. I can find support, inspiration to lift me up, remind me who I am. And that's the work that is incumbent upon each and every one of us in this community. No one outside of us is coming to save us. No one outside of us is coming to save us. And the truth is, we don't need anybody outside of us to come save us. In truth, we're already saved. You hear that? In truth, we're already saved. That when we're in a moment of doubt about what to do next, what is mine to do, what should we do? Do we need to wait for another minister before we start being vital again? No. No, our work right now is to restore this community. Do the work that is necessary to restore this community. And as we do that, we won't have to go get a new minister. We will attract the right and perfect minister. Right? Asking for resumes is not the right approach in my estimation. Our work is to restore this community, to do the work that is ours to do, to transform our lives right here. We have everything we need. We are not lacking anything. What we need is to engage. That's the only thing we're missing. And I've been feeling that energy of re-engagement. I don't know about y'all, but I've been feeling it and hearing about it and seeing it show up. So we're already in the process. The variable is, what is the condition of your faith today? What is the condition of my faith? I can tell you the condition of my faith as it relates to this community is success is ours. Success is assured. It's not something I'm hoping for. It's a done deal. It's just the working out. We're going through the motions and through the steps necessary to do what's necessary to restore our community. Who's on board? And even with all of us, we do not go alone, because there's a power greater than us, individually and collectively, that is also here present in this church, that is also present here in this community. Our work is to get back in tune with that. Our work is to get back in alignment with the divine order that is revealing itself even now. Because our work is still a community of love and acceptance where lives are transformed. There was a time when not anybody in this community doubted that for 1 second, because their individual life had been transformed being part of this community. It's still present. It never left the building. Where are you placing your faith? In what are you placing your faith? Because once again, you have perfect faith. You are not deficient. You are not lacking. And if you think you are, then just default back to love. Default back to God. Because everything you need is present. Everything you need for your personal transformation, everything we need for the transformation of this community is present here today. And if we do that work, we will attract the right and perfect minister in due time, in God's time. We don't have to be anxious. We don't have to seek it out. We don't even have to pray for it. We just have to do the work that is ours to do, and that new spiritual leader will emerge. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.